Good afternoon. We start in Sydney, where thousands of self-described freedom protesters have swarmed the city, calling for an end to lockdown. There were ugly scenes as demonstrators clashed with police, despite the state being in the grips of a spiralling COVID crisis. And as Tiffany Genders explains, at least 57 people were arrested.
What started as a rally at Broadway at midday has swelled into a marching movement, a 2-hour journey to Town Hall and back. As Sydney enters its 5th week of lockdown, it's clear a portion of the population don't believe it's justified. Thousands defying the public health order, travelling more than 10 kilometres from home to get here, and most are refusing to wear masks. Much of their anger directed to the hundreds of police trying to stop this gathering. There are officers on horseback, members of the public order and riot squad, traffic and highway patrol and rescue police, just to name a few. They were ordered to use as much force as necessary, and their aim was to stop this protest from going ahead. But today they were outnumbered. We've witnessed dozens of arrests, including a man who lit a fire outside Town Hall. Where's your mask today?
I'm exempt.
Do you believe in the public health orders, Anthony?
No.
My father passed away last year because he couldn't get the medical treatment he needed.
I'm from Bexley.
So you're defying the health orders to be...
I'm allowed to go out. My area's all right. I know you're the news, but you should be with us.
These scenes being mirrored in cities right across Australia as the virus and subsequent lockdowns cause unrest.
And as Tiffany said, it has been a similar story in Melbourne today, where thousands marched through the city, urging the government to free Victoria from stay-at-home orders. Maggie Rayworth was there.
Thousands of protesters are right now swarming the city. They say they just want their voices heard. It's clear people here are tired of lockdowns today, calling for their freedom. Protesters want lockdown number 5 to end now. Starting at various locations across the city, thousands have swarmed the streets.
Let us be free and enjoy our lives instead of being locked up in 4 walls.
I want a choice, and I want the choice to be mine.
Our kids are worth the fight! No more lockdown!
Many were angry and aimed their frustration at police. Hundreds of officers lined the streets, but they were clearly outnumbered. The media taking a hit too, some pointing their anger at anyone in their path. Today, very few masks were seen. Many here have planned to be arrested today, saying they want to show they're committed to their cause. Overall today, though, these protesters are asking for their freedom.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Jose Prado, Man-Made Survival. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel and watching this video. I really do appreciate it, because today's video is going to be a pretty important video. You know, these past several videos have been pretty important because of the information that I'm sharing with you. You know, although some of the information seems to be the same, there's just more things added to it, which makes it important for me to share with you. Alright, so what I did this time is that I started this video with what is happening in Australia. And the reason that Australia is really, really important, and hopefully you pay attention to the beginning of the video, is this one sign that was right there in the video. It says, "My kids are worth the fight." Alright, so this, when I saw that, you know, it kind of made me think, what have we done for our children to know that they're going to be going through a hard time in the future? You know, depending on how old your kids are, you know, from newborn to 17, 18 years old, their life is going to be completely different in their 20s, in their 30s, and beyond. And the things that, and the steps that we take right now, we're going to be able to set them up for a better future, even if the entire country or the entire world, you know, has gone to hell in the handbasket. So that is the reason that we must prepare. That is the reason why we must do the things that we have to do right now. And although, you know, I don't want to make it sound like things are going to happen tomorrow, let's just understand that things will eventually happen. Okay, especially as people are becoming tired of, you know, the lockdowns and everything that has to do with COVID. This particular video has nothing to do with COVID, but what I wanted to do is show you that people will be willing to fight for their children's future, even if they are very reluctant to fight for their own. Okay, so I really do think that the children will be the trigger in the future. So what I want to do with this podcast is that I want to show you how the food and the economy are being affected, not just here in the United States, but all throughout the world. Of course, the focus is going to be in the United States because that's where I live. And I do understand that I have an audience pretty much at this point is worldwide, thanks to the internet, thanks to the platforms that I'm in. But even if I don't address your particular country or your area, just understand that there's two things that will affect the entire world. Doesn't matter where you are. One is going to be the economy, because the United States one day is going to fall, and two is going to be the shortages of food. Everybody around the world, you know, the close to 8 billion people have to eventually eat. So when there's no more food available or very little of it, then that's when we're going to see the panic. That's where we're going to see people rising up, and we're going to see the standard of living shift from what people are used to right now. So that is the reason we have to take the steps that we are able to right now. Doesn't really matter the budget that you have. You know, the more money you have, of course, you're going to get more things done quicker. But if you have to take baby steps like I do, like others in this community of preppers do, just know that you need to continue taking those baby steps until the day that you can no longer do it. All right, maybe you hit a financial wall, or maybe a war breaks out, or maybe the economic collapse finally happens. Whatever the case may be, you need to continue taking those baby steps till the day that something happens, and just make sure that the steps that you're taking will help you to endure a shift in your standard of living, a shift in the way that you live your life. So I really hope that you get that from this particular podcast, because, you know, I do listen to other hosts, and I try to pay attention to what they're saying, you know, what they bring, their point of view. But one of the things that I see lacking in the entire community and most hosts is that they're not telling you that your way of life is going to change, that you have to really shift your way of thinking from being in a Western world to being something like Central and South America, or, you know, places in the Middle East or in Africa that we have known for a very long time that have economic woes, or that they have famines, or that they have, you know, droughts and stuff like that, because those things are being seen not only in the United States but places around the world that were never seen before. Now, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and show you this video that I've shown you in the past, but I want this to set the tone for the rest of the video. Like I mentioned, this is not about COVID, this is not about the lockdowns, but rather the consequences of those. Because, you know, one of the things that the lockdowns did is that it really messed up our economy, not just here in the United States, but all throughout the world. You know, the Australian people, if I'm not mistaken, they have been in a lockdown for over a year. And for the longest time, I have heard people in the United States, and, you know, in their podcast saying that, why is Australian people not doing anything about the lockdowns? Why are they not rising up? You know, if they would have not given their guns up a long time ago, they would have the means to be able to protect themselves against the government. But here's the thing. Even though that they don't have the weapons that people in America do and other places do, they're starting to stand up. And it's getting to the point where it doesn't matter whether they live or die, they want change. And the change is going to come. We just have to make sure that it's not being manipulated for a different future. All right, so we have to make sure that we take the steps right now for us to be able to withstand whatever comes our way, but also to be able to transform our way of living. All right, so this one is, you know, this video that I want to show you. It's about Biden's $3.5 trillion spending plan to boost the U.S. infrastructure. And, you know, a lot of people like it. More people really, really hate it. And there's people asking legitimate questions about, what is this going to do with inflation? You know, we already have inflation in the United States. And as you're going to be seeing here in just a minute, there's people already saying that there might be double-digit inflation in the next months, in the coming months towards the end of the year, and all of next year and the year after that might see even higher inflation that we may see by the end of this year. So the crisis is fast approaching, and even though this crisis that we're living right now is not really affecting everyone, it's going to affect you eventually. So let's go ahead and listen to this video, and then I'll come back and give you more information.
Democrats believe the $3.5 trillion would provide enough money to cover all of the president's priorities. It would address climate change. A source tells me that includes tax incentives for clean energy and vehicles and to create a civilian climate corps. It also has funding for universal pre-K and paid family leave. It adds dental, vision, and hearing benefits to Medicare and extends the child tax credit.
This is only the first step in a long road we will have to travel and must travel. But we are going to get this done because we so fervently believe that we must make average American lives a whole lot better.
Now, progressives have embraced the proposal. Senator Elizabeth Warren called it a strong step forward, while moderates held their fire.
They've worked hard on it, and we want to see it. And also, I've been very clear that I want to see the pay-fors and make sure that whatever we do is going to be globally competitive.
Now, Democrats insist the $3.5 trillion will be fully paid for. A source tells me they plan to offset the cost through a combination of higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations, savings on health care, and economic growth. Meanwhile, that bipartisan agreement on hard infrastructure like roads and bridges, it's still getting tweaked. And the number 2 Republican in the Senate, John Thune, he cautioned that Democrats' massive spending bill could undermine support for that more modest bipartisan measure. Yet President Biden is still committed to that 2-track strategy, even if some Republicans are predicting a political collision course instead.
Elon, thank you.
All right, so that information right there is important because it's letting us know how the government is planning to spend the money. And, $3.5 trillion is a lot of money. I remember seeing something on Facebook once that said that if the first stimulus that was given out, in April of 2020, if that would have been, instead of the money that was dished out to other countries and to, the big companies and everything like that, if that was just given to the American families, instead of the $1,400, they could have given out $14,000. And that's not me saying that I wish I would have gotten $14,000 from the government. What I'm saying is that those $3.5 trillion is a lot of money. It can give a lot of money to the American people. It can get a lot of goods bought with that. It can do a lot of things, right? But one of the big things that we're going to see is the inflation. So once that we see this inflation going up, my question is, have you talked to your children about their future? Have you talked to your children about they might not be able to enjoy the things that they're enjoying right now? For example, with the whole climate change thing and, with the bills and the incentives and the penalties and everything like that, what has been said is that the power bills of everyone is going to go sky high. The reason being is because as the government penalizes the power companies, what the power companies are going to do in return is they're going to have to pass the cost to their customers, right? Which of course is going to increase the power bill. And not only that, it's also going to be a tax on your car and how many vehicles you got and a bunch of other things. Of course, some places are going to be affected more than others. For example, California and New York might be more affected than a rural area like Alabama or other places. But the point is that they're wanting to trickle down to where that is going to be a penalty for the future. They're talking about changing all the cars on the roads by 2040, I think I've seen, or 2030. But the point is that, they have the plans on doing that. Now, what I could see is that right now we don't have the money for that. Maybe trying to do the transition, with climate change and electric cars and everything like that, that might be one of the triggers that makes the economy go bad. And you might not see the way that I see it, but I'm saying that is just another expense on top of everything else that the government wants to spend on. Add in pre-K, universal pre-K. That's a good thing for children who are going to go to pre-K And for the parents who cannot afford to send their kids to pre-K and pay for it, or take them to some type of daycare, that's going to be good for them. But as far as the money being spent by the government, it's not going to be okay. One of the other things that we saw in there is the paid leave and the child tax credit, and also adding dental and vision benefits to Medicare. Again, the people who are going to benefit from that, they're going to think is the most wonderful thing in the world. But in the long run, it's going to affect us. It's going to affect everybody in the country. So we have to make sure that we're preparing for that. At this point, really, we cannot complain about it, because we are seeing that we're going down the hill. And, one way that I have imagined it and thought about it before I did the podcast is that we're like going down a cliff in our car, but the hill, it has a slope. Gravity is taking us down, and we're pumping the brakes, but eventually either we're gonna run out of the cliff, or gravity is gonna take over and it's gonna flip the car, right? And then we're gonna go tumbling down, and there's nothing that's gonna stop us until we get to the very bottom. So what I'm suggesting is that you really have to look at whatever benefits you can get, so you can use it for your preparedness. Okay, if you're able to get food stamps because you're on the lower rungs of the economic ladder, you have family, or you have children who can get free food at school, then that more than likely you're going to be eligible for food stamps. And there's families who are already using food stamps, and what I'm telling you, if you're dependent on food stamps, or you're using it in your favor, use a portion of that money, because the government does give out a lot on food stamps. Use a portion of that money and put it towards your preparedness, to store away food. And the main thing that you want to do is that you want to put away whole grains, because those are the ones that are more shelf stable, especially if you put them on the Mylar bags and you suck out all the oxygen. That is going to prevent any little eggs or animals or anything like that might have, gotten into the food from actually being able to breathe. They die, and then you're going to be, that food is going to last you a lot longer than if you had it in a bag on the shelf and it wasn't protected. So those are the type of things that you can actually get on your food stamps. You can store up, and you can have a food for your family in the future. Now let's think about what the Bible says about something like this. Everybody knows the story of Joseph. What Joseph did, because God told him, or actually the Pharaoh, when he had the dream of the seven cows and everything. If you're not familiar with the story, I'm just gonna summarize it real quick. But I do encourage you to go look it up and see what it was about, and watch the movie with your children, because there's a children's movie. But anyways, so what happens is that the Pharaoh has a dream, and he did not understand it. So he tried to get his councilmen and the wizards and everybody else. Nobody could tell him what it meant. So he finally heard that Joseph was able to tell dreams, so he calls him up, right? And he tells him, hey, I had this dream, tell me what it is. So he tells him that, just going by memory, that he was in a dream, he was in a big field. And that there was 7 sick cows and 7 healthy cows. The sick cows ate the healthy cows, and then the cows died. And then after that, the land was barren. So what Joseph told them is that there was going to be 7 years of prosperity, that there was going to be grains, that the food was going to, come up normal. There's going to be abundance. And then the other 7 years, there was going to be a famine, a drought, and that, pretty much death all across the land. So what Joseph told him is that he needed to harvest all that extra food from the years that they had plenty and store it away for the years that there wasn't any. Now, I really do believe that we're going towards that direction. And, before I continue on, if I butcher that story, then I apologize. But the point is that there is forewarning in the Bible that says that we do have to have some type of storage in our home. It is a biblical principle. God did tell Joseph to tell Pharaoh, and then, to tell everybody else. So what we're doing with this is that we already look at what happened in the past. We're putting that practice in the present so we can benefit for the future. Now, the next video that I have for you comes from foxbusiness.com, and the title of this this article where the video is found is this: inflation will cause grocery prices to rise even higher by October, billionaire supermarket owner says. All right, so let's go ahead and watch this video real quick, but you really have to pay attention to what he's saying, not only the percentage, all right, of the inflation, but also when it could hit. And if it's going to hit by October, then more than likely it's going to last longer than that. All right, so let's go ahead and listen to the video. Here it is.
We're both in the food business and we're in the oil business, and food prices are getting higher, and we expect even more increases by October, and we're seeing anywhere from 10 to 14% by October 1st. So it's a real number. And oil prices, I know they're a little bit off today, but I expect even higher numbers. And it's a real, it's a sine wave, and everything just goes up and down. But it's, I expect by October, you're going to have over a 6% annualized rate of inflation.
Wow.
And food prices.
Are you having to pass? Yeah, I was going to say, are you having to pass those extra costs onto consumers?
Well, you have to pass it on. Otherwise, you're not going to. You're not doing your duty to guard your country, your employees, and your company.
All right. So a really important thing that he said there. Actually, several important things that we can draw from there. So at the beginning of the video, he said that they are in the oil and food business, right? And what he meant by that is that farmers need diesel, and they need other fuels to be able to harvest all that food. And if the prices of that diesel goes up, guess what? They're gonna have to go up on the price of the crops, and then eventually that's gonna trickle down because the 18-wheelers that transport that, they also need gas or diesel, and the cost of that is gonna go up even higher. So by the time that it gets to the grocery store, and then you get in your car, use your gas to get to the grocery store, the prices of all of that is going to inflate. He's talking about 10 to 14% increase by October. But let's say that delays a little bit more by a month or two, because that's right around the holiday season. We're talking about November with Thanksgiving and Christmas in December. And, this entire podcast should really give you the focus on your children. Because if right now you're struggling to be able to put food on the table, what is it going to look like when you are not able to afford presents? And that's not to put pressure on parents or anything like that, but you really have to make sure that your children understand how things may turn out in the future if you're in the, if they're not going to be able to have Christmas present in the future. Luckily and thankfully, and again, that's one of the wonderful things about America is that there's a lot of programs out there that will allow, or that there's a lot of programs out there that do have some type of benefit or support. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Support to be able to give you presents for your children. Through a local church, through the school, even other places that might be able to do that. Maybe you can look at that, sign up for it, and then you're gonna be able to have presents for your children. But my point is that you won't be able to hide that you're struggling from your children, for a long time, especially if you're already on the brink. So you have to allow your children to become mentally tough by understanding the reality will always be here, even though you're not able to protect them from there. All right, I hope that I'm making sense, because we really have to think about our children. We already did our best, giving them the best life that we can with the standard of living that they have right now. It doesn't really matter on where your particular place is, but we're all going to be affected by famine. We are all going to be affected by the economic collapse of the United States, and then dominoes all throughout the world, or vice versa. So getting your kids mentally ready for those days is going to be beneficial, because it's better for them to understand now what could happen in the future than going through it and then having the added stress of mom and dad cannot put food on the table and things like that. I mean, I know when we talk about something like this, it becomes kind of like a tough podcast, but I'm not going to sugarcoat the truth. I'm not going to sugarcoat reality, because reality doesn't really care. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. So of course Joe Biden is downplaying the inflation. You know, he's saying that that all of this is transitory, blah blah blah. And as I've already mentioned here in the past, you know, the banks have already pretty much said that there's going to be transitory hyperinflation, whatever that means. You know, the transition may last several years like Venezuela, but at least it's going to be transitional. Well, anyways, the point is that we cannot expect the government to be, honest with all of this. And it doesn't matter whether or not you voted for Joe Biden. It doesn't really matter whether or not you hate the guy, you know. We have to really look at what's going to happen, and then we have to position ourselves without really having to look at the politics, although it affects us. But the point is that you don't have to be sucked into it and forget about everything else. Now, this next article is really important because we are going to be seeing these prices. Now, you tell me, all right, whether or not this would be hyperinflation, because these type of prices that you're going to be paying for a hamburger are things that you see in Venezuela. Okay, so let me go ahead and read to you this article, and then I'm going to play a video. This video, I did not have it in my notes, but now that I think about it, I'm going to show it to you again so you can see. You can understand how inflation works, all right, especially when you're in an environment of hyperinflation. All right, so the article comes from the mostimportantnews.com, and the article is Inflation Shock. Are you ready to start paying $40 or $50 for a hamburger? During the pandemic, our politicians in Washington have been borrowing and spending money at an unprecedented rate, and this has pushed our national debt up to $28 trillion. All right, let me pull back from that just a second. That's $28.5 trillion, not adding all the stimulus. Where is that stimulus coming from? And where is it going? Because obviously, the official national debt is not writing it down, and the Fed's balance sheet has not increased either. So where in the world is that extra stimulus money going to? No idea, but we have to keep that in mind because I really do believe that the debt is north of $35 trillion. But anyways, the article goes on to say, meanwhile, the Federal Reserve has been pumping trillions of fresh dollars into our financial system, and this has resulted in the Fed's balance sheet nearly doubling over the course of this pandemic. Following Joe Biden's town hall on Wednesday night, the Daily Mail spoke to a restaurant manager in Manhattan named John Stratidis. According to Stratidis, rising costs and rising wages will mean that consumers will have to pay more for their meals. In fact, he is warning that New Yorkers could end up paying $40 or $50 for a hamburger. Obviously, we aren't on that point yet, but if we stay on the path that we are currently on, we will eventually get there. All right, so here's the thing. Those are hyperinflation numbers, and people are not going to be willing to pay $40, $50 for a burger. At least I don't think so. All right, maybe they will. Maybe they're really hungry. They're going to do it. But I'm telling you that we're going to see the things that we are seeing in Australia, you know, with all the with the protest and people holding signs saying that, you know, my kids are worth the fight and all the other things that we have seen all around the world. It's going to happen in the United States. And hungry children is going to really make parents very, very angry, more than losing the election, more than the government spending trillions of dollars, more than anything that the government could ever do. Starving children is going to really make some parents angry. And you don't have to go through that. Right now, you have the ability and the window of opportunity to be able to feed your own children. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you that video that I was talking about. So you can kind of get an idea of what hyperinflation looks like. And just look, all right, because in this particular video, you will see the guy who's been interviewed. He shows you how much a hamburger costs and in a can of soda. All right, so here's that video.
Per month. 40,000 bolivares.
So 40,000, to put that in perspective, you said that's like $6 or $7, right?
$6 a month. A month, not an hour. $6 a month. So you can imagine how hard it is to live here. See the prices here? This is a hot dog, 10,000 bolivares. I was talking about 9,000, but it's 10,000 now. Almost $2. Hamburger is like 30,000 bolivares. It means if you work the whole month, you can buy want a hamburger. One hamburger and a can of soda. That's the bizarre economy here. Nobody can afford 1 month living with this salary.
And so how do people buy hot dogs for $1 or $2 when they're earning?
So everybody here have one familiar who has left the country and send money here. One person send you from outside $100 or $200 monthly. You can afford living here.
All right, so you get the point, right? And we understand that we're going in that direction. That if we're going to be having hyperinflation, whether it's next week, next month, next year, in the next 5 to 10 years, if we understand that we're going to that direction, then the next thing that we have to understand is that we're going to hit price controls. All right, price controls are going to pretty much, they pretty much go hand in hand with hyperinflation because, you know, people are going to be extremely angry. They're going to be protesting in the streets. There's going to be riots. There's going to be looting. There's going to be a lot of things going on. You know, pretty much what we saw last summer combined with what happened in Venezuela, that's pretty much what you can expect here in the United States with economic collapse. You know, especially if the U.S. dollar is no longer the world reserve currency. Now, I have another video for you, and this is from Jacob Cliffs, and he does a really good way, or actually he does a really good job in explaining what price ceilings are and, you know, price controls pretty much. All right, this video it's about 3 minutes long, but pay close attention so you can understand what our future holds, because this will be extremely important, and I have a few thoughts on that. All right, so let's watch this video real quick. Here it is.
Hey, how you doing, econ students? This is Mr. Clifford. Welcome to ACDC Econ. Right now I'm going to talk about price controls. Right now, at the end of 2014, gas prices in California are around $4 a gallon. It's actually a little less, but let's just keep it simple and say that equilibrium price per gallon is $4 and the quantity is 100. So I'm tired of paying high gas prices. I think we should go to the government and convince them to get the prices lower. So the government should make a law and say that we should lower the price below equilibrium to, let's say, $1. This is the idea of something called a price ceiling. A price ceiling is the cap on a price the government sets so the price cannot go up to equilibrium. Again, a ceiling is the maximum price a seller is allowed to charge. So do you support this idea of having the price down here at $1 and we all get cheaper gasoline? It turns out that's why you're in this class. Right? If you didn't take econ, you would think that lowering the price would mean we could have more gasoline. You actually vote for this and say, hey, this is a great idea. But taking this class helps you realize that this is a horrible idea. If we lower the price for gasoline, that means the quantity demanded is going to increase right here to 200. So at a lower price, consumers will want to buy more gallons of gasoline. But when the price falls, the quantity supply is going to fall. In this case, it's going to fall to 50. Remember, at a low price, producers don't want to produce very much. If they only produce 50, that means we're going to have a shortage of 150 gallons of gas. So it turns out that this law, designed to help consumers by lowering the price, actually hurts consumers because now we get less quantity. Instead of 100 gallons of gasoline produced, now we only have 50 gallons produced. This is the idea of price controls, when the government comes in to control and manipulate prices. Now there are some exceptions, but for the most part, competitive markets should be left alone, because the government, if they come in, it's going to mess it up, cause a shortage or a surplus or some misallocation of resources. Another example of price controls is something called a price floor. A price floor is a minimum price that buyers are expected to pay for a product. So let's assume that the government really wanted to help corn producers by keeping prices artificially high. So let's assume that the current equilibrium price for corn is $10 for, let's say, 50 units. What's a unit of corn? Is that like a gaggle of corn? Is it like a box of corn? Again, let's say the government comes in and says, listen, that price is too low. $10 is not enough for our farmers. We have to increase that price. So they set a price floor up here at 30. Now, when the price goes up, the quantity supply goes up, right? Producers want to produce more, and in this case, they want to produce 100. And at that new price of $30, consumers only want to buy 30 units. So it turns out this policy actually doesn't even help those producers, because no one's actually buying the corn. And of course, there are exceptions to this, but in general, competitive markets should be left alone. A floor is going to lead to a surplus, and a ceiling is going to lead to a shortage. Now, it's really easy for students to get confused about this. They usually think a ceiling should go above equilibrium because a ceiling is high, right? It's a ceiling. But that's not true. A ceiling has to go below equilibrium if it's going to have an effect on the market. I mean, think about it. If a ceiling is above equilibrium, it's not going to have any effect, right? If the government says you can't sell gasoline for more than $30,000, businesses won't and aren't even trying to sell it above $30,000. So to have an effect, a price ceiling, a maximum, has to be below equilibrium. Now, this confusion also applies to a floor. a floor has to be above equilibrium. For example, for corn, if they said you can't sell corn for less than 10 cents, the producer's gonna be like, well, we're not trying to sell it for less than 10 cents, and so it's gonna have no effect. So all that being said, a ceiling goes below equilibrium, a floor goes above.
All right, so what Jacob Clifford did in this video, he did a really good job in explaining all of this. And, you know, he did it fast and easy, and you can understand exactly what he's talking about. So just for me to summarize with what we're talking about in this particular podcast so you can understand what I'm trying to say is this. If we hit inflation, you know, high inflation and hyperinflation, what the government is going to do is they're going to step in and they're going to try to put a price ceiling on everything that's going up. Right, because there's going to be protests, there's going to be riots and all of these issues. You know, we saw it in Venezuela and other places. So what the government does is that they step in, they say, you know, to Walmart and to other places, you cannot sell this particular price above this level. Okay, but in turn, what it does is that the farmers are going to be like, you know, forget it. They're not going to make as much as they used to. They're not going to use as much as the tractors that they used to because, you know, they're spending a lot more money producing the food than they're actually getting for it. So that is the reason why we have to understand this particular thing because of the next shift in this podcast. All right, so now that we talked about the economy, right, we're talking about how people are going to become very angry, how the government continues to print trillions of dollars, and, you know, God knows where it's going. And, you know, you need to talk to your children about the possible future that they're going to have. Adding to all of this is adding the scarcity in our food. All right, so I have here that I wrote for myself, you know, to share with you. I said equilibrium represents the fiat currency purchasing power. What happens when there is high demand and no supply, but whatever little interest there is to grow crops, there's still weather-related crisis. All right, so what I meant by that, all right, just thinking on what I'm saying is that right now, farmers are having a really difficult time growing things, as I'm going to be proving to you and as I have done in previous podcasts. Let's just say that, yes, there's price ceiling. Therefore, farmers don't really want to grow much, but whatever little they do try to grow is being affected by weather, is being affected by, you know, whatever you want to say. You know, a plague of locusts or grasshoppers or whatever. What happens when you have the combination of hyperinflation and you have the combination of some type of weather crisis? All right, so the next video that I want to share with you is it comes from care11.com, and it says drought forces Minnesota farmers to make tough decisions. Right, I'm gonna go ahead and share this video with you real quick, and then I'll come back with my thoughts. Here it is.
The drought is hitting Minnesota farmers hard and forcing some to take extra measures to keep going.
At Shoplifting Farms in Kimball, the cows are on the move.
They know if I take them to the next pasture, there may be better groceries there.
Don Shoplifting says the family farm has been dealing with dry conditions for the past 3 to 4 weeks.
When it gets dry like this, it just emotionally it's very tough. All you have to do is take a look at the cornfield. When it looks more like pineapples than it does corn, you know it's devastating.
For example, this hayfield in Kimball should be knee-high this time of year. Instead, it's sparse and barely ankle high.
And just devour any little green they can find.
Neighbors have reached out to help, offering their meadows. Don says they've also had to buy hay.
Hay prices has been skyrocketing over the last couple weeks. We just went through a pandemic that we had to use more of our hay inventory than we were probably planning on. And before that, our hay inventory was also lower.
Allison Vanderwall, executive director of the Minnesota State Cattlemen's Association, says in some parts of the state, farmers are being forced to sell cattle or retire early.
We're dealing with some really tight margins right now from feed inventory and then what we're getting paid for that live animal. It's kind of all compounding and saying, you know what, if we can't make it work, then this is maybe our time to get out, which is too bad. It's very, very sad.
Don says they're trying to keep the cow herd intact.
We've spent multiple years developing the genetics in these animals, so that is a last-ditch effect.
To help feed the herd, the farm is hoping to gain access to DNR ground near them. They need hay not just now, but to take care of the animals throughout the winter.
So we have lots of cattle relying on us feeding them.
In Kimball, Heidi Wigdahl, Care 11 News.
All right, so I hope that you understood what I was trying to say with that video. Okay, now that you have the information of price controls, of the government, you know, putting more money, printing more money, the inflation being here by October, November, and December, with people in New York and places around the country potentially be paying $40 to $50 for a hamburger. Once you have all of that in place, plus the added stress of drought, meaning that crops don't grow, the cattle don't get fed, farmers pulling out of the market because they are not able to make any profits. With all that being put together, you can understand that in the future there's going to be a big crisis. All right. So what do you do in that time? All right. So right now here in the United States, we're still in summer, right? It's the end of July. We're going into August. We have another month and a half or two before officially fall starts. And depending where you are in the United States, is where you're going to start seeing weather, or the climate starting to go down, getting colder. That's what I'm trying to say. Last year and the year before, and I believe the year before that, we saw that there was record early snowfall. So you may not have the opportunity, if you live in the northern states, to have a garden or grow whatever little you can before the snow settles or starts coming in. So the next best thing for you to do is for you to have your stock in place. All right. And this is for the preppers who have been doing this for a while now. You know exactly what the game is, but you really need to look at your inventory and go beyond whatever you have, because this problem is not going to be just several weeks, several months. Because one of the things that I'm really trying to get rid of the prepper community is the opinion of how much you should have. Because right now, what is in the prepper community, they're saying that however much you can handle, or however long you think your particular disaster is going to last. And what I'm saying in this is that you have to prepare for the long-term effects of something, what I've been presenting this entire time, because those are the things that are going to last a lot longer. It may last a year. It may last 2 years. We don't know. Okay? But the point is that you're going to be ready for when those things come home to roost. All right, so the next thing what I want to show you, actually what I want to read to you, it's an article from brownfieldagnews.com. And you really need to pay attention, right, to the warning that we are getting from places around the world, but particularly from this article. All right, so this is what it says. The U.S. is expected to produce a smaller wheat crop in 2021 with an increase for winter wheat due to higher acreage and better yield canceled out by a big decrease for spring because of ongoing drought in the northern and northwestern U.S. plains. A spring wheat production is projected at 345 million bushels, a drop of 41%, with the average yield falling 17.9 bushels per acre to 30.7. Harvested area is estimated at 11.215 million acres compared to 12.06 million in 2020. All right, so the reason that I decided to show you this particular article is because it's saying that wheat, one of the things that we really use here in the United States, has decreased this particular year by 41%. All right, so remember, we have... actually, the United States does not have any strategic reserves on food. They sold those out years ago for fiat currency. So pretty much what we're doing, as far as I understand it, and hopefully I understand it correctly, is that this year's harvest is eaten next year. So last year we had that harvest, and then this year we're gonna eat it, or we have been eating it, and then whatever we grew this year we're gonna eat it next year. Well, now next year we have a 41% decrease. Not only does that make less food on the shelves, but that also increases the price of whatever is available at the grocery store. All right, so all of this might be projected, or it might be included in the projection rather, of the 10 to 14% inflation at the grocery store. It may not. If it's not, then it's going to be a lot more devastating than we're understanding right now, all right, from the information that is available to us. So here's the thing, all right, so I want to recap, for the third time, because now I want to move into things that are going worldwide, all right, on how we're going to be affected. All right, so first, what I did is that I started this podcast with people protesting in Australia because they want their freedom, because they're tired of the lockdowns. The lockdowns have been there for a year now. It's devastating the economy in Australia. It's devastating the economy worldwide, really pretty much, except for China. China actually went up by 18% last year. And all of that is going to create resentment in the population. All right, so let's put that in one hand. Then other things that I share with you in this podcast is the inflation due to the money printing. Right, we're gonna see pretty much hyperinflation numbers just buying regular things that people buy on an everyday basis. That is going to reduce the standard of living for a lot of people. All right, but let's remember, we already have protests and the citizens' resentment already there in place. All right, then when you add the hyperinflation or an economic collapse to it, then that's going to infuriate people a lot more. All right, that is the reason why you have to talk to your children about their lifestyle changing, especially if your children are very consumed with today's technology. All right, so the next thing, once all these problems start to come reality, government is going to try to step in to try to make it better. But as we have known in the past, especially here recently with COVID, is that they make things a lot worse. So they'll introduce price controls, right, which is going to create shortages. It's going to create anger, even more anger, and then it could potentially make people become even more violent. All right, so now adding all of that with the food scarcity in the United States, people may have this idea. Well, if we can't grow it here, can we just buy it from somewhere else? And the answer is no. All right, so I got this list of the top 10 places around the world where the United States imports food from. This can be wheat, corn, whatever, coffee, whatever staple we use in the United States that is imported for other countries. That's what this list covers. All right, so I'm going to go through the list. What I did with it in my notes is that I also added a headline on how that particular country is being affected by also the weather, drought, crop failure and stuff like that. All right, so the first country is Canada. And this article is from abc.net.au, and it says, U.S. and Canada heat wave hammers crops, forcing up global grain prices. All right, that's the first country that imports to the United States or exports to the United States. The next one is Mexico, number 2. Mexico water supply buckles from worsening drought, putting crops at risk. That's from Reuters. 3, France. Europe's heat and drought crops losses triple in 50 years, study says. That's from France24.com. Italy's tomato harvest threatened by canned shortages. That's from Bloomberg.com. All right, so I want to hit on that real quick. All right, so here's the thing. Even if there is whatever that is being produced that is actually making it into being canned, it's not going to be able to be canned because there's a lack of cans. The steel that is used for the cans, there's a shortage of that too. So what does that do? It's just another bump on the road for the supply chain. So if you're able to can your own food, you really need to learn how to do it and buy all the items necessary to be able to do that in the future. Because chances are that even if farmers are able to have a successful harvest, all right, they might send it off to the plants and they say, it's going to have to rot here because we don't have a way to put it in a can because we don't have any cans. All right, so we have to think about that too. All right, the next one is Singapore. In focus, how climate change can threaten food production in Singapore. That's from Channel News. That's channelnewsasia.com. Thailand rice production recovers from drought. So at least we have one good news in all of this, and that's from worldgrain.com. Number 7 is UK. Devastating. Crop left to rot in England as Brexit begins to bite. That's from Euronews.com. And you know what? Right now, the UK is having a really difficult time with the supply chain, mainly because of the government, right? The government is telling them that if they get a text message that they pretty much have to go into lockdown for 2 weeks, and if they do not comply, then there's going to be repercussions for that. And it doesn't matter whether it's farmers, whether it's truck drivers, whether it's grocery store clerks and whatever. They don't really give a rip. What they're saying is people need to stay home if they get that text message. And they're already seeing pretty much a shortage of food in the grocery stores. They're already seeing prices going up. And they understand, you know, the people, not the government. The government don't really care, right, because they're going to be taken care of. But the people are starting to understand that if they don't do something about this, that they're going to starve. And again, the signs, like they have come out in Australia, will say, my kids are worth the fight. People will not be scared to go to prison, and people will not be scared to die if it means that they can feed their children. All right. Number 8 is China. Grains analysts missing as China shuts down information on failed crop. That's from abc.net.au, and pretty much what our article said is that China became pretty angry at the analyst, and now that person is missing. You know, nothing, that should not be a surprise for that type of information come out of China. Number 9, Brazil. Freak frost hits Brazil's Paraná breadbasket province, destroying critical corn, wheat, and sugarcane crops for 2022. All right, so this came from newscoop.com. And all right, so here's the thing about this one in particular, all right? These crops were the crops that were going to be used in 2022, okay? And of course, you know, corn and wheat and whole grain crops, they will last for, you know, 20 years plus if they're properly stored. So 2 years is not a long time for corn or wheat. But here's the thing. That if we are going to have trouble by the end of 2021, and then the stuff that we're going to use in 2022 is already wiped out, what does that tell us about 2022 and then 2023? All right, and let's remember, China has been buying fields of crops that has not even been planted yet. All right, so they already bought the futures of those crops. So we really have to look at that, because if they continue to fail, not only will China be angry, but China is not getting nothing. That will create food wars, and that will create water wars. All right, so the last one is Netherlands, and I didn't find any news from there. So out of the 10 places around the world, there was only 2. Well, technically one that had good news and one that I didn't find any bad news about it. So if, you know, no news is probably good news. So let's keep it at that. Now, I want to finish this podcast with this video. All right, so this video is from Zero Hedge, or actually the article where you can find this video is from Zero Hedge. The title of the article is, Watch, California shoplifters stroll out of TJ Maxx with arm full of merchandise. Okay, so pretty much what you're seeing is that there's 2 people walking out with clothing in their hands and a really big backpack. All right, so they're just strolling out. You know, they don't care about the police chasing them or anything like that, because in California, if you steal $950 worth of stuff and below, then the cops won't even bother to come looking for you. All right, so that gives them a green light to just take whatever they want. Now, what I'm playing on right now on the screen is videos from Venezuela where people are fighting for their groceries. They're fighting for food. They are going into all these supermarkets and you know, stealing everything from there. You know, there was one point in Venezuela where the hunger was very extreme, where they heard news that there was a warehouse with food, and thousands of people went over there to try to get as much as they could. You know, people died, people were hurt, and the entire building pretty much was ransacked. That's exactly what we're going to see here in the United States, especially in blue cities, where you are able to steal $950 worth of stuff and below. Imagine coming out of Walmart with $950 worth of groceries, coming out of Kroger with $950 worth of groceries, coming out of Amazon with, you know, $950 worth of groceries, coming out of all these other places worth that money. And, you know, those people are pretty much not going to get in trouble. And as the things, and as the situation gets even more dire, no one is going to get in trouble. And then eventually the population will do what they did in Australia, and they're going to fight back. They're going to say that they will not allow the government and the people who want to take this stuff for free to just take it, because they have worked for it. They have spent their money, they have spent their savings, they have done everything that they could and they had to do to try to provide their family with future with a future job, or with the future company in their family's name. All right, so that is the reason why we have to look at all this information, and we have to understand what's going on in the future. All right, again, this may not happen for another several years. This may not happen, not even in our lifetime. Maybe all this craziness can go for a very, very long time, and we just now seeing, with the craziness that we're seeing right now, maybe this is very, very mild. As crazy as we see this, and we cannot understand how in the world this can happen. What if this is not as bad as it can get? What if it can get a lot worse than this? And all of this lasts another 20 years. It lasts another 50 years. Well, all the steps that you take today, they're going to benefit your family in the future. All right, so that's why I talk in this podcast about generational wealth or generational preparedness, because if right now, all right, let's say you do have a bug out location, set up the way that I showed you in the previous podcast, where you have the housing units for your alliance, where you have, the barns built up with the chickens, the chicken coop, with all the other housing for your animals that you're going to have. You already have all the nut trees and the fruit trees, and they're already healthy and big, and they're, producing a lot of stuff that you can actually give away in the meantime, because you don't really need that much. When you have all your preps in place, once you have children and grandchildren and maybe even great-grandchildren, they're going to be able to use this stuff. Okay, hopefully they keep it in the family, and hopefully they can understand, and you can let them see that things can go south very, very quickly. They're going to have to keep this instead of selling it out. But the point is that the steps that you take today will benefit your family in the future. And, I've been focusing on children this entire podcast because they're the ones who cannot prepare. You can. One of the things that I see on Reddit all the time, it's kids, 14 and up, saying that they don't really see the point in going to college, or maybe even finishing high school, because, they really do feel like it's the end of the world. And I have tried to give them advice, saying that even though they cannot prepare right now because, they don't have a job or a steady job, they don't have income or anything like that, what they can do is learn. They can get books. They can learn how to grow a garden. They can learn how to take care of animals. They can have vet books that they can read. Even though they're not going to be able to practice it in real life until they get older, but they're already going to have the knowledge. And even let's say that they're still in their teens, and they're still in high school, and crap hits the fan. The information that is in their head is going to be very beneficial for everyone in their family, even if they don't have an alliance, the way that I put it here. Let's just say that it's them and their parents against the world. Whatever little information that they do have, that they have learned, is going to be very beneficial, especially if it's if it's information that can change their way of life by preparing to change their standard of living. All right, so that is the reason why I want to focus on children on this particular one, because they're the future, and they cannot prepare. All right, they don't have the ability to, because they don't have a steady job, and it's up to you to be able to set them up for the future, even if you cannot do a lot. Okay, even if you cannot provide, a piece of land, you cannot provide another home, a second home, or anything like that. Whatever little steps that you take right now that will be beneficial in the long run, that's exactly their foundation that they can build upon on top of that. All right, because you can buy the things for them right now, and they don't have to buy it for themselves in the future, all right, especially if you're not around anymore. And another thing, now that I think about it, medicines are going to become very, very expensive, all right, and hospitals will not have any type of medical equipment available for them to be able to treat patients effectively. And the reason I say that is because that's exactly what happened in Venezuela. There were hospitals that used to be, top of the line. Remember, Venezuela was a first world country, and their hospitals were good. As for the 70s and 80s, I mean, they were good for their time. But once the hyperinflation hit, in 2015, 2014, whatever, those hospitals were depleted very, very quickly. They could not resupply on gauze, on cast, on knives and stuff like that to do operations or anything like that, because hyperinflation hit. Things were very expensive, and there was a scarcity of everything. All right, it's including medications. So please talk to your children's doctor if your child has, type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, whatever it is that children may have. Talk to your doctor to see if there's a alternative, a natural alternative, in the case that the regular doctor is no longer available. All right, because hopefully they have all kids, or they have Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, and they are able to be taken care of by the government. Hopefully they have that. All right, but let's plan for the day that the government spending becomes so great that the government cannot even cover their medical bill anymore. All right, so I want to leave you with those thoughts. Reality can be very tough at times, and we must face it head on. Otherwise, we're going to set ourselves up for disappointment. All right, so I want to leave you with that. Again, my name is Jose Prado, and remember, always ready.
The Man-Made Survival Show.